You are listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's the new Rouge Radio. Tony Allen.
Because I'm not a coward to stand up for my country and the league I love.
Rob Dalton.
This is Ottawa's first draft since coming back into the league. I'm looking at draft-eligible players, and thus far I don't see any dead people, so they should be off to a better start.
Now, the Rouge.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Rouge Radio Podcast, episode 315, powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. And before we get into our banter, let's introduce you to ourselves. My name is Rob Dalton from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and joining me as always, Mr. Tony Allen from Medicine Hat, Alberta. And like I said, before we get into our little banter, obviously everybody's talking about my prognostication, right? So a lot of people are like, nah, there's no possible way that this guy could predict a tie. So what I've done is I've gotten clips of previous shows. Okay, So let's go back to episode 312. This is 3 weeks ago. All right, we were previewing the Calgary Stampeders, and I had this to say. Calgary 12-5-1. I'm predicting a tie. How about that?
There you go. Why not?
And you know when that
someone's got to have the guts to do it. You
know when the tie is going to happen? Week 1 against Ottawa. There you go. There we go. It's it's crystal clear. This is 3 weeks ago, right? Let's keep in mind this is 3 weeks ago. All right. And then a lot of people say, okay, maybe he forgot about it. No, then the week after we were previewing the Ottawa Red Blacks. Okay. When we had Janine Rashad on the show. After that, I had this to say. I would say 8-10, but last week I did predict them to tie Calgary, so I'm actually going to say 7-10-1. That's my prediction for the Ottawa Red Blacks. So there we go. Now, keeping into tradition, I know this is really making you eye roll, Tony, but then of course last week when we were actually predicting the games, I said this. Now pay attention to the score. You're going to see challenges galore. You're going to see touchdowns called back because of a Chintzy holding on a punt return. You're going to see everything that you want to see in a Grey Cup rematch, except you're not going to see a lot of defense. And it's for that I think you're probably going to see this going to those mini games, and it's still going to end as a tie. You're going to be entertained. If you're there, if you haven't got your tickets yet, get tickets if they're still available. I think this one's going to end 32-32 in a tie. 32-32. I was 1 point off.
Unbelievable. I can't even mock the scenario because it's so freaking amazing, Dalts. Like, I was like, I'll come into this week's show and be like, make fun of you, but it's like, I can't, man. That is just mind-blowing. I watched the whole thing unfold, and I had remembered those 9 teams and 9 weeks episodes. It's like, he has been calling this for weeks. And and then to see the score, I wasn't quite sure on the score, but I mean, let's be honest, screw the score. To call it tie straight up would have been like Sports Select's worst nightmare. They would have been paying out on you. Although I think because of their rules, 3-point games still count as a tie, so you would have lost your pool unless you'd called 3 ties. But who's crazy enough to do that? But either way, man, I just had to applaud you. That is just something spectacular. And to miss the final by 1 point, all I'm saying, if you had nailed that, that is a clip on TSN's Bar Down. That would have been on Bar Down for sure as the podcaster who called it weeks before it even happened.
I know. I feel like this could be instead of the Rouge Radio Podcast, this should be the Dalts Podcast.
Yeah, well, I think I thought we just end up changing the show to just people calling and asking about their futures.
Yeah,
should I take this job? Should I turn it down? Should I date this girl? Because Dalts knows everything.
Well, I mean, didn't we have an email last week asking us about his friend? It's like
that is true.
When did, like, all of a sudden we're like the Dr. Phil / Dr. Laura, right? I mean, asking, hey, what should I do? What should I do?
Well, maybe we won't go into personal stuff, but sports stuff, call it. I mean, you could make huge bank just on being one of those, call this number, 1-866, and get your lock of the week. You know, in America, those are very popular, those betting lines where you call in. And I know there's a guy on the Fan 960, Pharrell on the bench. He's got a whole website devoted to getting your picks for the week. But, I mean, you know what we need to do now? And I shouldn't say it because everyone's going to imitate it, but they don't have you. We need, for Grey Cup Sunday, we need Dalt's props bets. Prop bets. And we will go through all the prop bets for Grey Cup and have you just give all the right answers.
I think we should have it like, do you want to set this as a thing? Maybe we will.
Yes, we'll see we'll see where it goes from now because it's only week 1.
Watch me go 0 for 4 next week and be way off.
That's the thing I'm saying. Like, you really can't go anywhere but down from here. Good luck just trying to maintain it. But either way, we'll see how the season goes, and if it is, we will sell Dalt's prop bets list for like $5, and we'll just make a fortune. You know what sucks is in our pool tracker. I actually called for a tie, but my confidence level was 0 or was 1. Yeah, I saw that too.
I was like,
damn.
I was 2 for 2, and I nailed the Montreal win, and I got the tie, and all I got out of it was 4 points because I was more confident in Montreal beating Saskatchewan than I was about a tie that I've been calling for weeks. But I digress. How are things this week?
With me, very good. Yeah. I'm like, actually, I was gonna say we should be a little concerned because we painted our living room today because it was such depressing colors. My wife and we have kind of like an open concept floor for our living room and kitchen and dining area, and people we bought it for put this like horrible burgundy color with I don't even know, like a newborn baby poop brown. You know that yellowish brown that newborn baby poop looks like? Yeah. It was like, that's what it looked like. It was so depressing. But now we've put a nice light color up. I'm like, it's just a happier color. I'm like, I don't know if I've got it into me to rant anymore. I'm just so happy now sitting in this living room. There's nowhere to get rage from.
Oh, you know what? I'm sure eventually you'll find your inner Tony. We got it. We need to have a rant somewhere now.
Well, like I said, it is still early, and we'll see where it goes from here. There's always something that can set me off, so we'll see.
Well, I've got a question for you because I've been paying attention to your Facebook. I've been paying attention to your Twitter, and now with hockey season going into free agent mode coming this Saturday, I've got one question for you.
Yeah.
Who the F is Spencer Fu?
Apparently, he is one of the from what I gather, one of the prized NCAA free agents out there. And I mean, again, when people talk about everything that's wrong with the Canadian Football League, you look at something like hockey and the deal they have with NCAA hockey programs, where if a guy gets drafted and doesn't want to play for that team, he just plays out his 5 years and poof, you're a free agent. You can do whatever you want to. But this kid went from like 25 points in his first year as a freshman, or whatever Americans love to, cute little names they like to give each other for every level of school. So as a freshman, he has like 25 points. Then a second year, whatever that is, sophomore, he gets another 25 points. And then in his junior year, boom, like 25 goals. And something ridiculous like 37 assists for like 60 points in just 30-some games. And apparently that was enough to make him quite sought after, that Vegas, Detroit, Edmonton, and Calgary were all in on him. And, he picks Calgary. So, hey, the kid scores, whatever. The Flames are very weak on right wing. I don't pretend we're not. There's nothing comes from pretending like your team is perfect in every regard. So We got a right winger. We'll see where it goes from there.
I just found it was funny that that you went from, on your Facebook and Twitter, it's like, yeah, we got Spencer. I mean, you weren't this excited, but you went, yeah, we got Spencer Fu. And I'm like, who the crap is this guy? And then I just realized that, hey, maybe it's because of the fact that he didn't go to Edmonton.
Well, that was part of it, but I mean, that's really what I had fun with, is that, first off, there's everything with Calgary can't compete, can't get anybody because we have the crappy Saddle Dome, and here's Edmonton with Connor McDavid and the brand new Rogers Arena. Everyone's going to want to go to Edmonton now, and then some kid has a choice between Edmonton and Calgary. Obviously Detroit and Vegas with two other brand new buildings there, and he goes to the team with the crappiest arena out of all four of them put together. And the delicious icing on the cake is that Spencer Fu is from Edmonton.
Oh yeah, that must have been awesome for you.
So the Edmonton native Calgary Flames grew up cheering for. But in honesty, you got to admit, Calgary means not only does he get to be close to home, he doesn't have to actually live in Edmonton. So
what I like is apparently the Winnipeg Jets are going to be spending a little bit in free agency. Kevin Cheveldayoff getting a little lesson from Kyle Walters in the last couple of years. So I like that. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of the players that are apparently rumored that he's going after, but yeah, it's a nice change of pace to be like, hey, Sean Mathias, want to be our fourth line center? Sure is. Now we're talking about Carl Alsner, Dmitry Kulikov, Brian Elliott. I mean, these guys that at least are capable of bringing the team into the playoffs. But not my first choice. But again, the free agent market in the NHL isn't exactly the top tier as far as talent goes in the NHL. Let's stop hockey talk. Let's get into our 3 down hot takes. And we wrote this itinerary in earlier this week, and I guess we kind of had to toss one of them because we have some breaking news. And our breaking news is the CFL has announced, well, it's not announced officially yet, but we do have a new commissioner, and he is Randy Ambrogi. I think I've properly pronounced that name. Tony, I mean, he's an offensive lineman, former player in the CFL with the Argos. I believe he had some time with I want to say the Eskimos. But what's your opinion on this one?
I don't know. I would be lying if I said I knew a whole bunch. So, of course, as soon as the news started to break, I was kind of flipping through as many articles as I could to see, what this guy is all about, and CEOs and COOs of top financial institutions. The guy clearly run businesses very well as soon as he got out of football. He went into money, into banking, and he seems to understand what he's doing. I guess it's from that standpoint, it's obviously not just some hump that they've run out, because let's be honest, we talked about, let's bring in Pinball Clemens. He's a great personality. He loves football. Everyone knows Pinball Clemens, but could he do anything for the Canadian Football League as far as managing the league goes? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to probably say no. But this guy seems coming in, has an understanding of things, has a understanding how to run the businesses. I will assume they are successful if they're across the country, across North America. So from this point forward, all I can do now is kind of start watching to see what he's capable of doing as far as the league. I'm sure everybody is going to now be saying, make Toronto successful. And I've just come to the conclusion that that's possible. Stop telling the next commissioner to come in, he's got to make football in Toronto possible, because it is not a this year plan. I don't even know if that's a 5-year plan. That is a long brick to fix. So let's see what he does as far as sponsorships in the league, promotions in the league, where we're going to go as far as moving exhibition football games around the country like we had with Murray and Halifax. That's where I kind of want to see him going as we move forward. That's all we know about him, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking up his Wikipedia. I mean, obviously, the one thing that really piques my interest is is that he had an administrative role after he retired from the CFL, and by 1992, Ambrosie took over as the secretary of the Canadian Football League's Player Association, monitored the 1992 NHL strike as the CFLPA and the CFL renegotiated their CBA that same year, and he was also part of the CFLPA, a board that oversaw the expansion to the United States. So, I mean, he took a strong stance against lowering the import ratio, which requires each team to carry a certain number of Canadian players, and it was key in regards to into the proposed expansion as far as the dispersal draft intended to, as far as going into, I believe, Las Vegas that year or Sacramento, at least to make a fair level playing ground going into the U.S. So. I mean, there is that aspect as far as his administration and what the possibilities lie for Mr. Ambrosie, but this came out of nowhere because I've never, at least I wasn't paying attention enough to know if this guy's name was actually being floated around. Just going on his Wikipedia page, seems like he's got football smarts, and as well as he's got a pretty decent business acumen. I mean, he's ahead of certain North American companies. Again, this is strictly from Wikipedia. His leadership brought several changes of AGF management, which is, I believe, I don't even know what that stands for. I mean, this is almost like breaking news. So not a lot of information that we were able to get on such short notice. But so far, right now, I mean, it's a name that. Is probably not going to bring out a lot of fans and going, yeah, we know him, this is awesome. But at the same time, it's not the opposite end of the spectrum where, yeah, a lot of people are going to be like, I hate that choice. It's a fair choice. It's a guy who knows his football, but he also knows behind the scenes, and he does have a very good business reputation.
I like that he played in the league. Mm-hmm. I like that he's played in the league. He understands. He sees it from the player's side, so that should be interesting. And from what I also read as well, he was on the short list with Jeffrey Orridge as well through the last process. So by the sounds of it, he wasn't that random either. He was on the CFL Board of Governors radar the previous time.
Well, you dug as much information as I did, so kudos to Tony. I was too busy basking in the glory of picking the tie last week.
There you go.
that's my excuse as we move on to the next hot take. And again, we're not going to go through with any audio because I don't even know what kind of audio that we could actually get for this one. But I'll let you take the reins on this one because this has to do with your quarterback in Calgary, Mr. Bo Levi Mitchell, and I guess his activities on Twitter.
Yeah, it was funny because right after that game against Ottawa. And kind of before it, leading up to it as well, it just made me think of that one episode we recorded where Bo Levi Mitchell just gets too excited for Twitter, where he sees something he likes, and he's like that little dog when he sees another dog go past and apparently hates that little dog and just needs to bark and, oh, I know what I'm doing. I want to talk to. And again, that is not me disliking Bo Levi Mitchell in any way, but Bo was at it again on a couple of occasions. Before the big game, someone tweets out, I love watching Bo Levi Mitchell lose. And I love these guys that tag the players in it. Like, that's where their life is at. They have to go on Twitter and go right after players. Unless I'm saying something nice, I never will tag a player. There's no use. What I think of him is none of his business. But this guy tags Bo Levi Mitchell. So Bo responds with a quote tweet so everyone can see him basically drop him. Then you have a miserable life, he says, because it doesn't happen very often. So
mic drop.
Everyone loves a cocky quarterback, especially when he's Calgary's quarterback. Probably the most respected guy in the league is cocky Calgary Stampeder quarterback. Everyone loves him. And I'm being facetious by the way there. You couldn't pick up on it. And then after the game, apparently Bo Levi Mitchell did not care for what number 10 on the Red Blacks had to stay. Cedarius Bryant. Apparently Bo Levi Mitchell is not familiar with him because he just keeps calling him number 10. Great game one. Wish we could have finished that, but 10 from Red Blacks. I don't know your name, but you gotta zip it emoji. You don't play. And then goes on. There must have been an exchange there where Yeah, he didn't really like to be told stuff like that. I don't get so into social media beefs. I'm says Brian's response, and then just some back and forth. So again, Bo Levi Mitchell just causing some trouble on the old tweeters.
Normally, I don't have a problem with a guy of Bo Levi Mitchell's stature and his level of plainness, because he's the kind of guy that can actually back it up, especially that comment about the fan letting him losing. I love that comment because it's true. It's like, it doesn't happen, so enjoy it while if it does happen. I mean, last year it only happened 3 times. Unfortunately, one of them was in a key game, but I digress about that one. Man, I had something to say to that, but I can't remember. Oh, yeah, I was going to say, can you imagine what the outlash or the backlash that would have happened if it was a quarterback, let's say, I don't know, Kevin Glenn, who went on Twitter and said, well, it happened because, or enjoy it while you can because it doesn't happen often. And then the backlash from that was like, dude, it just happened last week.
Yeah. You better enjoy it because it doesn't happen very often unless we meet in the playoffs.
You better enjoy the loss because it doesn't happen very often with my current team because I played for 8 of them.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the third down hot take. And this one, if I would have told you that a quarterback passed for over 500 yards and beat what a lot of people said was a very improved Hamilton Tiger Cat defense, what quarterback would you have probably guessed had you not watched that game?
I have no idea.
Don't say Drew Willie. Don't say Drew Willie.
No, I mean, we know who Hamilton was playing, but let's just say for the purposes of your game, I would have said maybe Kevin Glenn might be able to pull it off. Definitely, I don't know, pretty much it.
Yeah, Ricky,
because Bo Levi Mitchell's not that old, but still.
Ricky Ray. I mean, are we? I mean, it's one game. Let's not kid ourselves because it's one game. Ricky Ray has been known to have one good game. I mean, this was a great game, but he's been known to have one good game, whether it's in a loss or a win or a tie, which I haven't predicted for the Argos yet this year, so don't count on that one. Mm-hmm. But he's. I mean, it's one game. Who knows? He could get injured this week. I hope not, because that was awesome to watch. But this guy at his age, could we possibly see the resurgence of one Ricky Ray, assuming that he could be healthy? Because when he was healthy, going back to 3 years ago, he was damn good. But even when he was healthy in the last couple of years, you could kind of see the wear and tear on him. So with that being said, under Trestman, with his game, with this team that seems to have found their offensive spark, are we seeing the resurgence of one Ricky Ray?
I would have no reason to say we can't see Ricky Ray having his swan song. I with the way he just looked and the receivers he has there, S.J. Green was making some fantastic catches, and I'm not saying he saved Ricky Ray because Ray spread the ball around. Not to mention that Toronto Argonauts football team did not look like the Argonauts that's supposed to be in complete disarray after that off season. But without going into previewing the Argonauts for next week, I'm just going to say right now, it would be so much fun to see Ricky Ray have a swan song and, maybe go deep into the playoffs.
You know what? That would be good. That would be good for that organization in that city to actually have a winning team in that city. Yeah. Because as much as everybody likes to think otherwise, the Argonauts are probably the only team that would actually consistently win a championship. You know what's funny? We had Derek Taylor on when we were doing our 9 teams in 9 weeks covering the Toronto Argonauts, and he said that you could not see them win more than 5 games. They traded for S.J. Green the day after, and he's like, hey, can I have a redo on the pod? Can I come on? Yeah. Can you imagine what he's going to want to say after seeing what S.J. Green and Ricky Ray did last week? I mean, that is just I think awesome is the only word that could be used to describe it. I mean, it's probably one and done in regard to being a stat day, but I could actually see this Argonaut team, should they stay the course, I could actually see them putting a little bit of pressure on whoever may be. Who knows? Maybe it's Toronto. that ended up winning East this year after that. But it's 1 week after a very subpar 2016. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll talk more as we preview week 2. When we come back to the break, the return of Tony's Magnificent Bastard. If you're listening to this, you're a fan of Canadian football. You may also be a fan of opportunity. If you have a product or service that you'd like to advertise, please let us know. The Rouge Radio podcast is heard by those Canada-wide from Burton, New Brunswick, all the way to Vancouver, British Columbia, and even expanding internationally to countries such as the United States, Germany, and France. For inquiries on how this spot could be yours, send an email to thenewrouge@gmail.com. That's thenewrouge@gmail.com.
Illegal substitution, too many men on the field, Saskatchewan.
Ball down, ball through, and the Montreal Alouettes have come all the way back.
And Dave Ritchie can only wonder if his BC Lions will indeed be 1994's team of destiny. Pasaglia's kick is up, it's good!
If you would like to interact with the host of the Rouge Radio podcast, you can follow them on Twitter at Rouge Radio. You can email them at thenewrouge@gmail.com. Like them on Facebook at facebook.com/Rouge Radio, as well as subscribe to their podcast account on iTunes, as well as subscribe to their YouTube channel.
Downfield for Stiegel, he's got it! No! Stiegel! Are you kidding? This is unbelievable! Touchdown, Bomber!
This is Don Wright of the Montreal Alouettes. You're listening to the Rouge Radio podcast.
Welcome back to the radio podcast, episode 315. Before we go, just a couple of programming notes. As I mentioned last week, I am going to be on vacay for the next 2 weeks, so I'm not too sure if Tony has actually had any plans of doing the show solo or...
You betcha.
All right. So it's going to be
I'm going solo.
Non-stop TA for the next 2 weeks on the Rouge Radio podcast.
Well, I've done a lot of shows in radio on my own. I'm sure hope I can pull this off.
Yeah, just have music in the background, if that makes you feel a little more at home. All right, let's get into the next segment, and let's get to our first of 2017. Tony, who's got your Magnificent Bastard?
Oh my God! Number 1! Seinfeld, you magnificent bastard!
I really wanted to go to the Edmonton, BC game for my Magnificent Bastard, and I'm not sure if I thought about texting this to you or if I actually did text it to you or message it, but I was thinking, barring something mind-blowing in what I thought was going to be a boring Toronto-Hamilton game, I've got my winner for the Magnificent Bastard, and it was going to be Duke Williams out of Edmonton, just because that whole game, and he had some pretty nice clutches. Now, there was also that other gentleman whose name escapes me right off the top of my head, and I think I know it, but I'll pronounce it incorrectly, so I'll just play dumb at this point. But still, there were some circus catches by Duke Williams that I really enjoyed, especially for a rookie game. I'm like, barring a miracle, I've got my Magnificent Bastard. And then I sat down, started watching the Toronto-Hamilton game, and was just absolutely treated to what is probably the best story that could have come out of that game. From one catch to two catches to a one-handed catch to a 32-yard catch, it was just the S.J. Green show. And having to have sit for pretty much the whole season last year, to be cast away from the Montreal Alouettes, to show up in a battered and beaten in a Argonauts team that was falling apart at the seams. What was he going to do there? Well, he only came in and put up 124 yards. And again, with already, which he seems to do, and I think, because not that I want to steal your thunder, Dulce, but I do remember saying S.J. Green makes some great catches at the start of the season. Okay, maybe I'm talking about Saskatchewan at the time on who has big opening games, but either way, I'm trying to save some face after your historic night. But, I mean, S.J. Green shows up for the spotlight. He knows what the national stage is. and he just knows how to play football. So from the one-handed catch to the triumphant return to the Canadian Football League and just putting on a show in Toronto for week number 1, S.J. Green, you magnificent bastard.
He, as well as Ricky Ray and Jonathan Massey, a defensive back from the Montreal Alouettes, were all named Shaw Top Performers of the Week, and it was well earned. Let's get on to our Week 2 CFL predictions. We start off on tomorrow night, as of this recording, because we're recording Wednesday, but tomorrow night, Grey Cup double rematch, rematch of last week. The Ottawa Redblacks traveled to Calgary to face the Calgary Stampeders. I'm just going to go ahead and say this is not going to be a tie, but Tony, where do you think this one's going to go?
It's so like, why do you even bother calling these games? Except for you, who knows exactly what they're going to do at any given time. These teams play amazing football games, and I think at the end of the day, let's see another amazing football game. Can they do it for what, a 4th consecutive time? 5th consecutive time? I don't know, but let's look for a good one. I'm going to predict this one going Calgary's way because, well, kind of their turn to get a win out of this thing. So I'm going to take 31-26 Stampeders.
Yeah, for this one, it's got to be heart-wrenching for the Red Blacks to have that lead, and you can make any excuses that you want in regarding to command center review and whatnot, but you still were up by a certain amount of points that you should have put away, even a good Stampeder team. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I really think that maybe with DeVaris Daniels out, you're probably looking for, maybe Bo Levi Mitchell relies too much on Marquay McDaniel, and maybe that is the sore spot. I think they come out with a win just because of the emotions coming out of that game, and maybe the Red Blacks are maybe they're just going up and down emotionally. They didn't come out too healthy out of that game as well, but I do think the Calgary Stampeders come out of this one. I'm not going to go as far as saying a last-second field goal, but it's going to feel like that because it's going to probably come down to the final minute where Calgary wins this one 22-20.
All right, I do want to say something before we move on to game number 2 here, and it's not to bring up an argument I had with, well, not an argument, just a question I proposed to Ryan during our Stampeder show, but I did bring up the suggestion of bringing in competition for Rene Paredes at that kicking spot, and again, 37 yards for a guy who's supposed to be as good as we've made Rene Paredes be, and let's be completely honest, 37 yards, I don't care what the scenario is, or if you can find a gray area to make 37 yards seem like it's the most impossible kick in the Canadian Football League. If you are supposed to be on a Grey Cup champion caliber football team with the game on the line, you've got to make a 37-yard field goal. And this is not an exception for Rene Paredes. At that length, and even sometimes shorter, he has not been consistently guaranteed getting field goals. And at 37 yards, I should have been able to say this thing is money. But between what happened in the Montreal-Saskatchewan game and knowing that I was already questioning what Rene Paredes can do, I was not confident in that kick, and it didn't happen. And yes, the Stampeders were dominant this year, but you do not win Grey Cups, and you do not be a contender by saying, okay, we're weak in that area, let's just ignore it because he missed some field goals, but we were 15-3, so I mean, who cares? Let's not start a fire where there's no smoke kind of thing. I think this is something Calgary should get on right away, and I was hoping that wasn't sour grapes. Well, okay, it was sour grapes because I was pissed he missed a 37-yard field goal, and I want to see an announcement that Calgary has brought in a kicker to their camp sometime this season, because I'm not going to go all season long for the next 19 weeks wondering if Rene Paredes is going to hit every one of his field goals.
I'm just a counterpoint. I'm glad he missed the field goal just because of my prediction.
That's it. You can't even come back and say, well, he made the next one. That's irrelevant because it never should have gotten to a tie.
Yeah, no, you know what it is that I am so happy that Winnipeg overpaid for Justin Medlock. He is almost automatic from any from any point in the field, at least on the opposing opposing team's field. And you're right. It's like at a certain distance, even if you're having a bad game or a bad year, if you're a great kicker, you should be able to make those kicks with your opposite primary leg. If you're a lefty, you should be able to make it with your right and vice versa. That's just how easy those kicks are. Even though nothing is automatic, those are kicks that have to be made. We're not asking you to make anything out of 40. We're asking you to make 37-yard kicks. So these should be made. Moving on to the first ever doubleheader of the year, and it starts at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or I guess 6 o'clock Central Time. The BC Lions in Toronto, back-to-back home games for the Toronto Argonauts. This one, by God, was BC's offensive line. They were horrible. They were absolutely horrible last week. And I'm still, I mean, it's week one. I mean, this is even worse than preseason because you really don't know what you're going to have in preseason because everything's so vanilla. You're playing people that are not even going to be on the roster. I mean, week one tells you, okay, this team is good, but does it tell the whole story? I don't think so. I don't think BC's offensive line was that horrible because but at the same time, I didn't see that Edmonton's defensive line was that great before this game. It was just kind of like maybe Edmonton's defensive line actually came to play. Maybe BC really just missed Javon Olafoy when they traded him to Montreal in the offseason. Maybe that was the key to BC having their success last year, because I could tell you they did not have, I can't recall one drive in that game where you could say BC's offensive line looked really good. Toronto's defensive line, it was okay. But if you're looking for a confidence builder in this one, it did not look good. I really want to pick BC in this one, but my heart and guts is Toronto, and it's going to be, I got to have to say Toronto wins this one 25-21. Tony, where do you see this one going?
I really got caught up into the Toronto hype last week. I enjoyed it. I just thought great on Toronto, and when Will Hill blocked that field goal attempt and it went the other way for a touchdown, I thought, whoa, football gods, you effed this one up hard, because Toronto does not deserve. That's so unfair for how they were playing football. And I mean, unfortunately, it turned around again, because then there was a big bomb afterwards that, basically separated for the Argonauts. But I mean, I feel like if I say it now, I think everyone was thinking it, but all the football experts have said it, so now it just sounds like I'm parroting what they said. But I think we all saw it. This Argonauts team loves to air the ball out. They seem to just love going deep, and that's so exciting compared to what we watched Edmonton do to the the Lions in their game, where they won it by airing it out. And even my tweet was like, Lion Defender 1. Hey, should we cover that guy? Meh, whatever. Because he was so open. If those Argonaut receivers and Ricky Ray see that kind of coverage, Toronto can win it. Unfortunately, I also know that there's a guy who's pretty good at coaching footballs and correcting football games and correcting mistakes on BC's Lions sidelines, and that's Wally Buono. And I remember the Calgary BC game in week one last year. BC did not look like a team that was going to compete with Calgary, but again, it was a missed field goal. It was a bad play calling by Dave Dickinson that cost Calgary the game there. I absolutely expect a better BC Lions football team, a prepared BC Lions football team, and one that will likely overcome the mistakes that the Hamilton Tiger Cats made, because, like I implied during the 9 weeks and 9 teams, I don't think Hamilton is a very good football team, and Toronto was able to exploit that, on top of the fact that I think we're starting to see the smoke and mirrors clear and crumble that surrounds Zach Collaros, although he'll come out of that game because he's covered in Teflon. None of that was Zach Collaros' fault. Sorry, I'm veering off into a rant, which I think I've already had one so far tonight. I think BC can make those corrections. the Argonauts are not going to get that Hamilton Tiger Cats team. They're going to get a better prepared BC Lions team. So as much as I'm with you, I'm hyped up on the Argos hype, but I'm still going to take the Lions 24-21 in that one.
The second half of the doubleheader ends in Edmonton, where the Darian Durant, I can't talk today. Darian Durant led Montreal Alouettes visit Mike Riley and the Edmonton Eskimos. I think this one's going to be a blowout. When I watched that game last week, Saskatchewan didn't look pretty, but at the same time, given what Darian had to work with, they didn't need to be. And I know a lot of people are going to come out with Saskatchewan lost it, Montreal didn't win it. I mean, are we really... I'm going to get on my rant. Are we going to go into, let's say if Saskatchewan goes on an 0-5 skid, because I don't think they're not going to, but let's say if they do, are we going to go with here we are with the best 0-5 team ever? I hope that we're not going to be going down that road. That's all I got to say about that one. I guess it was kind of like a mini rant. Anyway, moving on forward. I was not impressed with Montreal. I wasn't impressed with their defense. Maybe their secondary, their young secondary was ready to play. Their linebacker, none of them was actually able to get to Kevin Glenn. This Kevin freaking Glenn you weren't able to get to. You put pressure on him, but you weren't able to get to on a regular basis. I don't care about Saskatchewan's offensive line. They allowed the pocket to collapse, and you still couldn't get Kevin Glenn on a regular basis. Edmonton, I was really surprised with their offensive line. They're playing probably more maybe under-ready a BC Lions team, if that's a word. But now they've got film on Montreal. And Montreal maybe have film on Edmonton. I just don't like the idea of Darius Bowman, Duke Williams, Brandon Zylstra, and others against his young secondary, and I think Mike Riley is going to exploit that like he's never done it before, and Edmonton takes this one 30-12. Tony.
Well, yeah, I have nothing to counter that. Edmonton just looked fantastic. Montreal, let's call it what it is. How do you miss that field goal to beat Montreal? That's another one that was, no, Montreal really should not have won that football game. I'm not about to say, all due respect to Darian Durant throwing wicked shade on the Saskatchewan Roughriders in his post-game interview about how this was the football gods making that football go wide. No, Darian, it was just a shitty kick. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you did not destroy the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You might have looked good here and there, but you did not straight up beat the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And, oh my God, Adam Konar.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell fuels this guy? Okay, there's a fun side that I want to have after this, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
But as far as a football player, this guy's insane. Is he clinically insane? He is all over the football field. Big hits. He never quits. Have you ever seen the movie with Keanu Reeves, The Replacements?
Oh, yeah.
John Favreau, I think, was in that one, too. He played the cop.
Yeah.
And he was insane. He wouldn't stop hitting Keanu Reeves in practice. You know, the whole red jersey. Don't hit. Don't touch. All I could think of with this Adam Konar guy was, that's him. That's just, this guy goes 100 miles an hour. It's like, as much as I dislike the Eskimos, they managed to found another guy that's like, as a football player goes, how do you not respect how this guy plays football at 100% on every play? So between him and just how the Eskimos looked, and of course, betting against Mike Riley is just a fool's bet, especially when you're going up against Montreal. I have to take Edmonton at 27-13, and that's only because maybe something happens that they pull Riley early and just use backups after that. But 27-13 is what I'll take in that football game.
All right, as we finish off week 2, the Saskatchewan Roughriders open up brand spanking new Mosaic Stadium against provincial rivals, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who had the bye last week. And Tony, where do you see this one going?
Actually, I think I see it being a close football game. I don't know if that necessarily means a good football game. Winnipeg is a week behind. Winnipeg's a week behind everybody now. That either A, means they're extremely rested, more practice and ready to go, or they're just one step behind maybe everybody else. And, maybe there's just some jitters. I don't know what's going to happen. Saskatchewan's obviously going to have a lot of emotion with the new stadium. And I think it's very important for the Bombers to do this season, I believe, what they did last season and take that last game at their stadium. There's nothing greater than owning that game against your rival and putting it in the history books. For Winnipeg to have the first win at that new stadium and have it go in the history books for the rest of time that Saskatchewan lost their football game, that'll be pretty big for Winnipeg. I think they probably have to overcome some early game rust and then figure it out. Saskatchewan's always good for blowing something open at some point. It doesn't matter how bad they're losing. They'll bust open a massive play regardless. Saskatchewan, I just find, does that. You think they're down, and next thing you know, it's a 79-yard touchdown. Next possession, a turnover and a touchdown, and somehow they have a football game. But at the end of the day, I still want to take Winnipeg in this one, 26-24.
It's funny you said that, when you said that Winnipeg would come out of the gate very slow. I actually predict the other way around. I think that Winnipeg is well rested. Coming off the week 1 bye, they are a week behind. The one thing that I was worried about in regards to a week 1 bye is that some teams, like last year's Saskatchewan Roughriders, they had a huge roster turnover, and so therefore they couldn't really get into a regular game. Everybody was caught up. They were a week behind. Winnipeg didn't have that huge roster turnover. They got rid of certain players, but it was very minimal, right? The additions that they had was very minimal, so that's not going to be a concern. For Saskatchewan, I think they're going to be emotionally drained probably going into the first quarter, and I think that's somewhere where Winnipeg is going to take advantage of that, and they're probably going to come out to, I'd say, like maybe a 10-13-0 lead coming out in the first quarter, and then that's just going to be stopped right there, and I think Saskatchewan's going to take it from there. It's going to be a close game. By no means is it going to be a blowout. Now, whether it's going to be an entertaining game, that remains to be seen. I think at this point, Andrew Harris is going to be heavily used as a receiver, as a running back. If Saskatchewan keeps on using that three-man rush, man, that running game is probably going to be utilized a little bit more often. A lot of people are going to say, well, nobody has any film on Winnipeg. Winnipeg has film on Saskatchewan. We're dealing with, very experienced coordinators. Richie Hall has seen Steve McAdoo, his playbook. They've got film on each other, and there's no secrets as far as the coordinators go. The only thing you have to worry about is maybe the experience and maybe history on the player's reputation, a.k.a. Kevin Glenn, his late game interceptions. And I think that might actually be the turning point, or at the very least, where it will be close game. But I do see this one going into Saskatchewan's favor by the score of 26-24. And as we move on, I guess I kind of got this on the itinerary reversed, but we'll go into our brand new segment, which everybody, it's a brand hit. It's a big hit. Everybody's telling me, hey, I love that segment. It's awesome. It's a great segment. And we're referring to our mystery deck, and I've gotten notifications on my phone right now. I haven't seen it, but I do see that there are notifications. So Tony, you've already tweeted a hint about the next mystery deck card?
I have tweeted out the mystery deck card for tonight. Only one person's responded. I sent out 2 today just for fun, for warm-ups, and I gave essentially the whole back of the card, the years, the teams, the games, and the stats. So right out of the gates, if you're looking at the stats, it's like, okay, sacks, I'll know it's on the defensive side. If yards, I know this or whatever. So, but I really trimmed the deck. So only one person's guessed on this one, but it's somebody who has the deck. So instead of just letting it go, apparently they need everyone to know how smart they are, despite not actually being smart because they have the deck. So nobody's really taken a shot at. Earlier today, there was 2 cards and a lot of guesses. It did go. I sent you checked it out as well. But now you're mystery guy. I'm only going to give you the year, the team, and if you want, games were on there that I tweeted as well. But your player, 93 to 2002, 93-94, he was in Winnipeg. 95-96, played in the NFL. Came back in 97 through to 2002, where he played for the BC Lions. But you're not going to get a ton of stats, so you might need to ask questions. I don't know. You could also see the card on Twitter if that helps. But
no, I've got my phone in front of me, but all I got is notifications.
25 games in Winnipeg in 93-94, then went to the NFL for 2 years. BC from 97 to 02, and actually, to be fair, he did end up with the Toronto Argonauts.
I think I know what it is. Just for a hint, what position?
Wow, you don't want to take a guess, or would that blemish your image of knowing it all? You actually want to go to a hint without looking like you can get the slam dunk based just on the years and the teams?
Oh, okay. Let me
vanity play by Daltz here.
All right, okay. Here it is. He played, I believe he was the focal point of Matt Dunnigan's record 713-yard game in Winnipeg in 1993. Is the answer Mr. Alfred Jackson?
It is Alfred Jackson.
Oh, yes.
3 catches in BC's 2000 Grey Cup victory. Ended up in Toronto. Alfred Action Jackson.
I remember that game like it was yesterday.
That's amazing how throwing in Toronto at the end clinched it for you.
Because I was trying to think, okay, I was like maybe thinking, and I forget that these cards only go up to 2002, right? So like
2002 season.
So it's funny that I think a lot of the cards that you tweeted out today had some Ottawa Renegades, right? And so that right there was a lot of that itself was a hint. And I was like, well, who played for Winnipeg? And I was like thinking, might be Alfred Jackson. And then it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. It only goes up to 2002. So when you said Toronto, I was like, oh yeah, that's it. That's who it was. So Alfred Action.
We also did Denny Montana. Good call on that one earlier today. I thought I would beef it up a little bit after my first attempt at a warm up got answered pretty quickly. Alfred Payton, I think, was the first one of the day.
All right, let's move on. Let's enough pat on myself on the back because this whole show's about me basking in my insufferableness. Do
you want to do some power rankings? I just realized right now there was no power ranking on the itinerary, or are we just going to pretend we don't do power rankings this year?
Let's do the power rankings. It's the one thing I've done wrong is missing the power rankings on the itinerary. Tony, how did we do?
Well, we decided clean slate because I did text you my ideas, and you kind of wondered if we were going to go back into last year or preseason, but I thought let's start clean slate, absolutely based on game number 1. And Toronto looked good enough against what is probably I don't know if you want to say a better team, but they looked damn convincing. We took Toronto to take the number 1 seed to start week number 1 in the power rankings. Edmonton at number 2, Ottawa at number 3, Calgary goes to number 4. Number 5 is Winnipeg, BC at number 6, Montreal number 7, Saskatchewan number 8, and I believe for the first time ever on our Rouge Radio Power Rankings, Hamilton is dead last.
Yeah, it's been a while since they've been dead last in anybody's rankings, but they did not look good, and they looked not good not being good, if that makes sense.
And that was another offensive line that was just if the plan for the 2017 Hamilton Tiger Cats was to keep Zach Collaros healthy, well, then they are doing a horrible job at sticking to the plan because Toronto got to him often and hard. I think you had the tweet of the night through the show account on how bad Zach Collaros got hit on one of those sacks.
I don't know. If you're a wrestling fan, you would get this tweet. And I'd have to do my best Jim Ross impression. Back in the Attitude Era, I can't remember who it was, but he absolutely just leveled Collaros with a sack, and I believe he actually fumbled too as well. I could be wrong on that one. And I sent out a tweet saying, "By God, he cut him in half." Just like Jim Ross, channeling my inner Jim Ross. So that was funny.
And it was funny because it's like the only person who ever if you could have a guy who was the best at getting sacked, it was Buck Pierce, and this was a Buck Pierce style sacking. Nobody got sacked like Buck Pierce. I don't even know if that's really a thing, but when Buck Pierce got sacked, it was the most entertaining thing in the whole world. And that's if we can make that a metaphor, he got Buck pierced, because nobody got sacked like Buck Pierce.
I was just going to say, that's the new thing. You know how everything gets a verb? When you screw up, you automatically get included into a verb. That's the way. If a quarterback gets sacked really hard, they just got pierced.
Oh, exactly.
That's our new thing. We've created a new thing. All right, let's get on to emails. Before we get into the tweets and emails that we got in the last couple of days, I want to go shout out to an email that we actually got on Monday, and he kind of had it answered. One of our listeners, Taylor, sent us an email saying, "Your last podcast got me thinking, is Drew Willie a backup anywhere? If so, where would he fit in? Maybe Montreal behind old man Durant, or Saskatchewan behind equally as old man Glenn. Saskatchewan is my choice because of injury potential." And then 4 hours later, actually, I can actually pinpoint this because 4 hours later, he was signed by the Alouettes. And then he actually sent an email again saying, "I guess my question was answered." So kudos to
I don't think, and I think maybe I saw this come up in our Twitter conversation through the Rouge Radio account too, that I don't think Montreal is secure enough there with Darian Durant to be not considering something as a backup. And had that not happened, maybe I would have picked Montreal as a good candidate.
That's what I do as well. Fake Gainer actually sent a tweet earlier today, and I actually like this one. Said, "What are all..." Well, he speaks in Southern language, so excuse me.
Yeah, what's up with that?
"What are y'all thoughts on a touchdown Atlantic 2018 in Halifax? If I had to do it, which team gets up the home game? I'll hang up and listen." You want to take this one? I got my guess.
Yeah, it is tough because, it's really hard to, I guess, give a justifiable answer why one team is less deserving of a home game. It really just, in my opinion, has to be a random pick. I don't think you can say this team is any less worthy than having all 9 of its home games as somebody else. I think keep something like touchdown Atlantic going, and then eventually everyone loses a game. But I don't think, in my opinion, there's a better team out in the Maritimes than anyone else, because my brother-in-law is from Nova Scotia and he loves the Eskimos. So you could say there is that large French connection out there between, I think is it New Brunswick or Nova Scotia that has such a large French population from, historically speaking, in Canada. But maybe the Alouettes, if you absolutely need me to give an explained answer. I don't know. What about you?
This is a big toss in the dark here. Saskatchewan. And then here's my reason. I don't think they'll lose money if they lose a home game. Everybody wants to make as much money as they can off their home gate revenue. But I think that if Saskatchewan lost a home game in New Mosaic Stadium, they're well off for money. They're not going to miss that gate revenue. It's nice to have it and whatnot, but they're not going to miss it. Another option would either be Winnipeg. And I think what would happen is that whoever it is the choice, I think it faces the other team. What better way to grow the game in Halifax than a long storied rivalry that's actually probably starting to actually become relevant again with both teams actually on the up and up, right? Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, picking Saskatchewan as the home team in Halifax. That's my guess. If you were to have another touchdown Atlantic, that would be my guess.
Personally, because the topic is up and I want to change it a bit, me personally scraps touchdown Atlantic altogether and makes it touchdown Quebec City.
Oh, that's, again, and with that being said, I'd still do Saskatchewan and Winnipeg.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's move on. This one was a little tongue-in-cheek on Twitter. Joey Panku actually asked, hey, what's a fumble?
What's a fumble?
Yeah, and I don't think it's in a rhetorical sense. I think it was just a matter of,
facetious
in regards
on video review.
Yeah. Do you want to touch that? I know that we were talking about this off the air when we bumped it off. Do we want to touch that subject?
You know what? I'm not afraid to say on record what we said before the show. The whole attacking command center is old. I'm not saying it's any easier to take. I'm not saying it should be ignored. But heading towards Twitter, running to Twitter every time a ball is fumbled and it goes to the command center on a review has just become too easy. It is literally too easy. It's nothing new is being said. Nothing new is being delivered. If they're not going to change it, flooding Twitter every game with the same kind of, I don't even know what a fumble is anymore if that doesn't count. It's just old. We're not offering anything new to this discussion. So until the Canadian Football League changes it, going on and saying the league is embarrassing, the command centers, I'm not saying don't be frustrated. It is extremely frustrated. But for me, in that regards, there's nothing to contribute to it anymore.
The views and opinions of Tony Allen do not necessarily represent that of Rouge Radio. If you want to contact Tony, he's available at Tony Rouge Radio.
Yes, I did change that Twitter handle. Good pickup.
All right. Chris from BC wanted to chime in on the email last week about the guy who's losing his friend over the NFL. He says, two simple words, good riddance. And then he adds in, he was probably a Pats fan.
There you go.
Raquel from Edmonton, our last email, says, any suggestions for my fantasy team this year? I don't know, do you want to?
You're the genius.
Oh, I only predict scores based on who's playing.
Okay.
This is, fantasy.ca is down, so I'm not, if you're looking for a sleeper pick for a guy to line up for, I don't know, your CFL Pick'ems or your CFL on TSN Fantasy League as part of the featured group that we're part of, the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Just throwing out that plug. If you haven't, go ahead and join. I don't believe that there's any kind of deadline when you can join. Anyway, I digress. Sleeper pick, I would, you know what? I picked this guy on my team in the last couple of days on my fantasy team. Brandon Alexander out of Winnipeg. He's going to be playing that boundary quarterback position in that secondary. And as is the case with last year with the rookies going in Winnipeg secondary, they're going to be a ball hawking secondary. 6'2", 220 pounds. He's a very big physical threat. I like that guy. So if you can manage to pick him up, and he's going to be probably dirt cheap, very good value. Another guy who was just signed to the roster this past week, Alex Hoffman-Alice, coming off replacing J.C. Sher, who unfortunately is gone for the year. That was after that scary injury last week. Those are the two guys if you're looking for, I guess, on the TSN fantasy, they do team defense. So maybe Edmonton. Yeah, Edmonton's the defense, and maybe Brandon. Yeah, you know what? Screw it. I just wasted 5 minutes of your time talking about things that don't matter. But yeah.
There you go.
All right.
But it was a convincing 5 minutes.
It was a convincing 5 minutes. Exactly. Tony, any final thoughts?
My final thought is keep going, Toronto Argonauts. I'm very excited what we saw last week, and what's even more terrifying is 2 dropped passes in the end zone by Argonauts receiver, and one guy who probably ran the wrong route that cost Ricky Ray 3 touchdowns, giving him 500 plus yards and 1 touchdown. on the day, which I always joked in Ricky Ray's entire career. There's a guy who could throw for 500 yards and have 1 touchdown or like 2 touchdowns. Even in Edmonton, that's all I always noticed about Ricky Ray. But if you want to save football in Toronto, if this new commissioner can do anything about it, I don't know if he can. Winning solves everything. Establish that environment there. Establish some winning. Get Ricky Ray on all your morning talk shows. I know I watch breakfast television out of Calgary, and there's always Stan Peters on there. Get the media behind that and hype that Toronto football team just in case they happen to be legit. Tell SGJ Green's story to anyone who will listen, and good luck to the Toronto Argonauts. I would love to see them finish on top of the East this season.
They are a feel-good story of the year of 2017. That'll do it for episode 315. As I said before, I am going to be on vacay, so it's all Tony all the time for the next couple of weeks. And as we wrap this up, here's my weekly dad. Are you going to be doing the dad joke next week and the week after?
Why don't you just text me a handful or DM me a handful, and we'll try and pick the best out of what's left.
All right, so here's the last dad joke for a couple of weeks, at least from me. So I walked into a bar, and I asked the bartender for a scotch on the rocks with a twist. He poured me a drink, and he said, "You're adopted, and your parents are secret agents." I did not see that coming. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.